Stillwater this morning, Scramble. Glad to have you here, and glad to have the Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Marc Morris, in. Good morning to you.
Yes, good morning. Glad to be here.
Been a busy week, hasn't it?
It's been a busy couple of months here as we get ready for the school year.
Really has. We had you on, I think, maybe 3 weeks ago, something like
so.
that.
I believe it was.
We had a good visit there, though, and I know that it's a fluid situation. Numbers change. We see all those things.
Mm-hmm.
But we're getting charts out now, and we're learning the protocol. That's a word we're all using a lot now. The protocol's in place.
I think so.
And I want to have you on I'm just kidding, by the way, what I'm saying. Every Friday, because it looks like you're in charge on Fridays.
Yeah.
And I appreciate kind of that way of going it, that we're going piece by piece and week by week.
Yes, we had, I think fluid, that's a good term, and you hear the dynamics of the situation. One things we're working through, all along, here's been our path. We've really given people two paths and said if you want a virtual option, we're going to provide that virtual option, and you can have your child in it 100% of the time. Or we can have a traditional option, which is the traditional school that you and I grew up with a little bit of nuances and safety measures. But then if we are not able to have that traditional offering, either due to widespread coronavirus in the community, student attendance issues, maybe staffing issues, then we would move into what we call distance learning. So it's where the teacher would still be the teacher, we'd still transition, so we would go to distance learning. So what we're working through on these protocols is how do we make that decision to go from traditional to distance learning. And, I have probably, maybe complained about snow days and having to get up early but I would happily trade that for what we're working through right now, because it's definitely a lot more complicated. What we looked at, we put some things in place back in early June for staffing. So if we know if our staffing levels get a certain level that we can't fill, then be able to provide a safe environment for our kids, and we can trigger it. We looked at attendance levels, like if student attendance gets below 70%, then we're looking for a couple of days, and we'll look to go to distance learning. But probably the most difficult one was when we have spread within the community. Then as we have spread within the community at certain rates, then how do we shut down the schools or shut down activities to help control that spread, get it down to normal levels, and then we can kind of resume back to the traditional learning. Now, it's not ever a sense of, do we want to be in distance learning? We want to be in traditional learning, but we don't want to put somebody's safety in jeopardy. So as we're looking through these decisions, the State Department of Health came out about 4 weeks ago with a color-coded system that just says when you have the number of new infections within a community over a 7-day average, if it falls in this range per 100,000, then you're in a low, right, in a zone. And then if it goes higher, then you're in a higher zone. And they color coded them green, yellow, orange, and red. So to give you an indication that when you go out into the community, you have more risk or less risk for exposure. So what that chart, then the State Department of Education, kind of the following week or week after, converted that into, here's how this applies to school districts. So that they recommended schools implement it at their July 23rd meeting. So what we spent last week is going through those recommendations, talking to our local health officials, and we're translating that into our protocols that were approved last night. So what it does, they, instead of having 4 bands, they really did 5. There was an orange category that they really called Orange 1 and Orange 2. But at the lower levels, just a high level view here, at the lower levels, green, it's really kind of what they call the new normal. There's still some exposure, but it's very, very low. So we would have traditional learring.
So we're starting off in green. I printed off I've got the code here in front of me.
So we're in green, and then the next category up is I believe about 1.5 yellow, 1.5 to about 14 new cases per day on a 7-day average. So these are the new cases per day. So it's in yellow, and what we are here in Payne County have been in that yellow zone for about the last 4 weeks. We range from about 7 to 12 new cases per day on average, is what we're looking at.
Okay, Marc, explain to me what the difference in what your protocol will be and what you're doing between the green and the yellow, because instruction method, it says on both traditional in-person, on-site instruction. What's the difference in the green and yellow
Well,
and
what
how you?
what we will do, these will actually be added later on to other items as well. So we're looking at extracurricular activities
Okay, okay,
that will come in with the green. We have some other things, maybe staffing that we will include into it as
gotcha,
well. So it has level of categories, and as we're looking through it internally, but this one was really just to get the school closing decision out so people know.
gotcha.
So that will be some differences. As we transition up into that higher band of maybe 14 to 25 new cases per day, then we are looking at distance, and we're also looking at another few options there as well on Orange One. But that would be a distance learning environment. So what would happen if on Fridays it comes out that we have 20 new cases per day on average here in this area? Then we would make a decision that the rates are increasing in this community. We need to lower the spread, and we transition to distance learning for the following week.
And then you have orange 2 and then red.
Yeah, and there, even though some of those are the same, we have some other things and other
Right.
things that will be tied into it. But essentially, once it gets over 14, you're making modifications or adjustments, and then once you're at orange or red, you're closed down, and you're not going to reopen until you come back to yellow.
You mentioned extracurricular stuff. Everybody wants to know about sports and band and all these things, and everybody is having to figure things out
Yeah.
because you are in a different world when you're participating in those.
Absolutely. It's been, one of the, just a challenge because as we looked at some of the best practices on what you can do, it's definitely different than what you can do in a classroom. And what has not really hurt, but at least this system is coming in. Schools are starting to adopt it for the instruction and what they do, maybe special ed classes and some other things. There's really no overarching guidance on extracurricular. So it leaves it to the individual school district to kind of bottoms up develop their policy. And it wouldn't be difficult to do. It's what we're doing right now, working through. We kind of got it drafted out, and we'll get it approved by the board. But what happens is you're coordinating with other communities as well because
Sure.
they have teams. They're trying to work through what do they allow, what do they not allow, and it may not align with what we have. And I think at the end of the day, what we're going to do is put out a recommendation that we feel is keep safety and security, the safety and health of our staff and students at the forefront, while try to also give kids our student experience and try to balance that to the best of our ability.
Yeah, so you were talking about how anytime you're an educator, you have best interests of the kids, but you literally also have their lives in your hands during a certain time of the day, and that's with the buses, and also with this, and so erring on the side of caution, I would think is always almost a priority when you go into these
Yes,
things.
we have. We track what we are doing. We put together a task force to work through the health and safety protocols. We consult with our local health officials and medical individuals. And I've monitored ours and monitored others. We are always leaning more towards safety, more restrictive, and that's what we want it to be. We want to take care of our people and take care of our kids.
Yeah, I was talking to a doctor this week here, and I think this was off the air, but discussing exactly the conundrum that you guys are in, the fact that ideally we all want to be social. I mean, just when people
Sure,
ask me, do I
sure.
need to come in or can I call? I always give them the option. Calling is great. We're doing safe distancing and everything here, so in person is better, and because we love that. But it is almost a contradiction at times on what we need to do and also the precautions we need to take. So
It is. We have been. When the coronavirus hit, we essentially shut down since spring break on, as far as having people on site, and we transitioned to our offices to off site. So I was working, 5 days a week out of my office. I mean, out of my office / living room,
Right.
and was productive and worked the whole time. But there toward the end, you miss that interaction or having a short conversation at the end of a meeting or maybe getting coffee together.
And those things are actually more important than you think too, because it gives you a
do
pulse.
realize that. Yes, I
Yeah.
think so.
Because I mean, I've thought here, if something were to happen, and this is a great place to work, and we do have the ability now to do things in a remote location with broadcast quality. I mean, technology's taken us there. So if I was exposed or it was asymptomatic or whatever, I could do this from my home.
Right.
but I
Right.
don't want to, right? But I would, but we'd be missing that one-on-one element that you. But sometimes those sacrifices are just needed, aren't they?
Oh yeah. I mean, we as people think through all the items, we have 800 employees, so we're working toward. We've already had, we're working through FF, the coronavirus leave that we're working through. Who people are caring for ones who are coronavirus, have child care issues, or have been exposed. We've had our first employee with a positive case that we're working through it. We've had individuals who are quarantined that we're trying to move to remote work when they can. So, it is complicated.
Yeah.
It really is as you're trying to manage something this large.
When coming up with the stuff, and you can go. The News Press did a good job, I think, in Bo Simmons and Michelle Charles.
Good. Yeah.
You can check that out, or you can go online to the Stillwater Public Schools. But in coming up with the protocol, I know you're sharing the ideas with other schools or learning from them and the school board. But what about tapping into parents and teachers? The teachers have to be there every day. And I
Teacher,
know,
yeah. So right now, what we have is all of our staff will report to work. So whether we're in distance learning or in traditional learning, they'll report to work. Now, what we have, a couple reasons we do that is we think, can we get them safely there? And that was the first. We don't want to bring people up who we don't put in a safe environment, but we feel like we've got protocols and things in place to do that. But once we start thinking, our distance learning is completely different than what it was last year. We're taking grades. We've identified all the kids who need internet or devices. So every one of our kids will have access to internet. We'll have conduct Zoom meetings. We've got a whole new platform, Google Classroom. So when we bring the teachers up, we need good internet service. We need them to have access to the resources. We need our special ed teachers working with the regular classroom teachers, because if one kid is
Right.
falling by, we're not meeting at IEP. We need them working closely together. Our teachers are working closely together on professional development. Say if they're having struggles with maybe how to implement something through our new platform, they can lean on one another. So we think it's the best environment is to have them up until at some point we'll evaluate it. But we are, as long as we can, if we go to distance learning, we're pulling our teachers and staff, and we're gonna give this community the best that we have.
And I think, and I understand about it, you have to get them in there safely and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, kind of like I was talking about, I'd rather do it here. That's the comfort zone, and they're, that's where they're at
Right.
home. I would
Right.
imagine when they're teaching, and not that I would blame anybody, and I'm sure you wouldn't either. There's all the respect in the world, but have any teachers that opted out for this next year? We see that in sports. You hear that term where people aren't retiring, but they're just
They took a retire. Yeah, I've heard it in other districts. Now we actually extended our leave of absence. So in our policy, they have an opportunity to take a leave of absence.
okay.
So if someone who has a medical condition, we
Sure.
allow them to take a leave of absence, and then they can come back the next year. I'm not sure we have anybody. And last I talked to our HR, I don't think we had anyone take that offer. What we've been able to do is some of the coordination as well. Is we allowed this virtual learning option. So if we had individuals who requested maybe a modification to their schedule, maybe to be away from kids, some of those we were
Right.
able to put in a distance learning teaching environment, because we went through our staffing this week and assigned 24 teachers over to teach virtual learning. So some of those who
Okay.
maybe had whatever underlying condition that would make them more susceptible to the illness from COVID-19, then we place them in that. We're getting quite a bit of that done. There's also, it's a little bit, because there's some laws and things, personnel laws that we are following if we have to meet. But a lot of those who have had some underlying conditions, we're moving them into those environments to put them in a safe environment where we need their services. They're going to be very valuable to these virtual kids. But I think as of, there could be a few more, but right now we were at 24, 25 teachers that we moved over to virtual.
Okay. When you're talking about the we, there's so many people involved in this because while you're the guy in charge, you're the superintendent. You have the principals, you have your board, you have the teachers. When you say we, how many people are behind these decisions? Because I know you want to hear from as many different sources and backgrounds as you can.
We have done. We try to layer it. Historically, you try to layer the decision making. So sometimes I'm just informed. I mean, I don't.
Right. Yeah.
For example, I I'm involved like personnel hiring, where you've got your HR trained to go through and process it. The principals are going to hire the teacher. You're really not going to get involved at the
Right.
superintendent level on any kind of teacher decision. Where if you had a principal, then probably you're
Right.
going to hire the principal, but they're going to have the teachers. They're going to recommend those up. You're going to review them and then process them through to the board. So you have some things in place. You cannot get involved in every decision. You have to have
Yeah.
people under you who can
Yeah.
make those. But we have through this whole process, and I think I really it's been kind of a little messy, not messy at times, but just hard decisions as are discussing hard decisions. We tried to really get a lot of staff and parent engagement early on, is get feedback on what we're hearing. And as we go through and we think something needs to be adjusted, we will adjust it and move
Right.
forward. Because my personality is let's get a plan, let's implement the plan and go forward. And from week to week it just changes, and you got to be fluid, I think is the term
Yeah.
that you were using. But I'm really proud of that we've leaned more closely or heavily on safety, and that we've also engaged people in this process.
Yeah. And there is this when you're dealing with thousands of students, in fact, thousands of families, you've got thousands of different stories,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no way that, and I haven't checked online, I haven't seen all the back and forth if there's a lot of it, but there's no way you cannot have that. No way.
Yeah.
And so hats off to everybody with the responsibility. It'd been nice, from my point of view, to see the state maybe take on a little more responsibility and make.
I think so. It is. I have to realize you do get a lot of emails, and there's just a lot of emotion in those emails, and you have to not take it personally. You realize that
Right.
there's some struggles and things that they're working through just like us in it, and things that you don't even think about, Steve. I mean, we have worked with parents who are maybe a divorce situation.
Yeah.
Where one parent wants to go to virtual learning because of safety, one parent wants more traditional, and the courts are backed up, so they're not able to get some resolve there. And that's happened multiple times, and those things that you don't even think about.
Right.
And I really do. It's a tough time. We realize it, and we have tried to be accommodating and help as much as we possibly can.
Yeah.